Picture this. You're sitting in a boardroom 3,000 miles from home when your husband calls to tell you he's divorcing you, and oh, by the way, he's already sold your house and spent the money on his new girlfriend. What he didn't know was that I'd been 3 steps ahead of him for months. And what happened next? Well, let's just say karma has never been found so sweet and free from the boardroom. If you've ever felt powerless, betrayed, or underestimated by someone you trusted, this story is going to hit you right in the feels. Hit that like button if you believe in justice, and subscribe because trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. Now, let me tell you exactly how I dismantled my cheating ex-husband's entire world. My name is Sarah, and 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I was a successful marketing director for a tech company in Portland, Oregon, married to Marcus for 7 years, and we owned a beautiful craftsman home in the trendy Hawthorne district. The kind of house with original hardwood floors, a wraparound porch, and enough character to make your friends jealous every time they visited. But let me paint you the real picture of my marriage, because looking back, the signs were everywhere. Marcus had this way of making me feel small without ever raising his voice. He'd roll his eyes when I talked about work, interrupt me mid-sentence at dinner parties, and somehow always position himself as the hero of every story we told together. The house, our beautiful house, had been my dream. I'd found it during one of my Saturday morning runs, fell in love with the morning light streaming through those big windows, and convinced Marcus we had to see it. I'd worked overtime for months to save for the down payment, picking up freelance projects on weekends while Marcus played video games or went out with his buddies. But somehow, in his version of events, buying that house had been his brilliant idea. I should have seen the writing on the wall when he started working late more often. Marcus was a financial advisor, and he'd always been ambitious, but suddenly he was taking client calls at 9 p.m. and scheduling weekend meetings. When I'd ask about it, he'd get defensive, telling me I was being paranoid and clingy. "Sarah, you don't understand the pressure I'm under," he'd say, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. "I'm trying to build something here, and I need you to trust me." So I did. I trusted him when he said he needed space to focus on his career. I trusted him when he started coming home smelling like unfamiliar perfume, claiming he'd been networking at industry events. I even trusted him when he suggested refinancing our house to get a better interest rate, signing whatever paperwork he put in front of me without reading the fine print. God, I was such an idiot. The business trip to Seattle was supposed to be routine. 3 days of client meetings, a product launch, and then back home. I'd been looking forward to it actually, some time to think, to breathe, to figure out why my marriage felt like I was slowly drowning. The hotel room was sterile and cold, one of those corporate chains where every room looks exactly the same. I'd just finished a particularly brutal day of presentations when my phone buzzed with Marcus's call. I remember thinking it was sweet that he was checking in, maybe even missing me. "Hey, babe." I answered, settling onto the uncomfortable desk chair. "How's your day going?" The silence that followed should have prepared me, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. "Sarah!" His voice was different, cold, calculated, almost gleeful. "I'm calling because I have some news." My stomach clenched. "I'm divorcing you." Just like that. 7 years of marriage, dismissed in 4 words. But he wasn't done. "And I've already sold the house. You'll need to figure out where you're going to live when you get back." The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand. The room started spinning, and I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "You, what?" He actually laughed, this cold, satisfied sound that made my skin crawl. "Come on, Sarah, you had to see this coming. We haven't been happy for months, and honestly, Vanessa and I need the money to start our life together properly. That little house was fine for what we were, but she deserves better." Vanessa. The name hit me like a physical blow. All those late nights, all those excuses, All those times I'd questioned my own instincts, they crystallized into this one moment of brutal clarity. Marcus? I managed, my voice somehow steady despite the chaos in my chest. You can't sell the house. We both own it. Another laugh, this one even crueler. Actually, Sarah, I already did. The closing was this morning. Vanessa and I are celebrating with champagne as we speak. You should be happy for me. I got way more than we paid for it. The market's been incredible. I sat there in that sterile hotel room, staring at my reflection in the black TV screen, and something inside me just shifted. The devastation I should have felt was there, don't get me wrong. My marriage was over, my home was gone, and the man I'd trusted with everything had just casually destroyed my entire life. But underneath that pain, something else was stirring. Rage. Pure, focused, white-hot rage. Because here's the thing Marcus didn't know. The thing his arrogance had blinded him to. When we'd refinanced the house 8 months earlier, I'd been the one handling all the paperwork. And because my credit score was higher and my income more stable, our mortgage broker had suggested putting the deed solely in my name to get better rates. Marcus had been so busy flirting with his secretary that day, probably Vanessa, I realize now, that she'd barely glanced at what he was signing. He just scribbled his signature wherever I pointed, trusting me to handle the boring details while he texted someone who definitely wasn't me. That's great, Marcus, I said, and I meant it, because in that moment, I realized he'd just handed me the greatest gift of my life, the complete and total justification for what the car, which made me feel worse, is the first fall of the head. I hope you and Vanessa are very happy together. The satisfaction in his voice was nauseating. I knew you'd be reasonable about this, Sarah. You always were too passive to make a real fuss. Passive. That word echoed in my head long after I hung up the phone. Marcus thought I was passive. He thought I was weak, predictable, someone who would just roll over and accept whatever scraps he decided to leave me. I stood up and walked to the hotel window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The city lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time in months, I smiled. A real smile, because Marcus was about to learn just how wrong he was about me. That night, I barely slept, not because I was crying, though there were tears, but because my mind was racing with possibilities. I kept thinking about that moment during the refinancing, when the broker had explained that having the deed in my name alone would save us almost $200 a month. I tried to discuss it with Marcus that evening, but he'd been distracted, scrolling through his phone and making non-committal noises. Whatever you think is best, babe, he'd said without looking up. You're better with this financial stuff anyway. At the time, I'd been hurt by his dismissal. Now, I was grateful for it. I spent the rest of the night researching real estate law, fraud statutes, and divorce proceedings. By morning, I had a plan, not just for getting my house back, that was the easy part, but for making sure Marcus understood exactly what it felt like to have your entire world pulled out from under you. The funny thing about betrayal is how it clarifies everything. All those little moments of disrespect, all those times he'd made me feel small or stupid, all those nights I'd gone to bed wondering if I was crazy for feeling so alone in my own marriage, suddenly it all made perfect sense. Marcus hadn't just cheated on me. He'd been slowly, systematically breaking me down for years, making me doubt my own worth, so that when this moment came, I'd be too broken to fight back. But here's what he didn't count on. I wasn't broken. I was angry. And angry women are dangerous women. As my plane lifted off from Seattle the next morning, I wasn't the same woman who boarded 3 days earlier. That woman had been unsure, questioning herself, trying to save a marriage that was already dead. The women heading back to Portland knew exactly who she was and exactly what she was going to do. Marcus thought he'd won. He thought he'd outsmarted me, taken everything I cared about, and left me with nothing but the humiliation of starting over. He had no idea that he'd just declared war on someone who never, ever lost. The flight back to Portland felt like the longest 3 hours of my life. but not because I was dreading what I'd find. No, it felt long because I was eager, practically vibrating with anticipation, to begin dismantling Marcus's carefully constructed fantasy. I'd spent the morning making phone calls from my hotel room before checkout, first to my attorney, Rebecca, who I'd met through a networking event and kept in touch with over the years. When I explained the situation, her sharp intake of breath told me everything I needed to know. "Sarah," she said, her voice a mixture of sympathy and barely contained excitement, "please tell me you have documentation proving sole ownership of that property." "Every single document," I replied, and I could practically hear her smile through the phone. "Then Marcus just committed several felonies, and we're going to nail him to the wall." My second call was to my best friend Jenna, who'd never liked Marcus and hadn't bothered hiding it. When I told her what happened, she was quiet for a long moment before exploding. "That absolute piece of garbage! Sarah, I'm so sorry, but also, and please don't hate me for this, I'm kind of excited to watch you destroy him." That made me laugh for the first time since Marcus's call. Get in line. But the call that really set things in motion was to the real estate agent whose name I found on the listing. Marcus had somehow managed to post for our house. When I explained that I was the actual owner and that the man who'd claimed to sell it had no legal right to do so, there was a very long, very expensive silence. "Man," the agent finally said, his voice tight with panic, "are you absolutely certain about this?" "I'm holding the deed in my hands right now," I said, which was true. I'd made Rebecca email me copies of everything from her files, and I never signed anything authorizing a sale. What followed was a flurry of frantic phone calls on his end, to the buyers, to his broker, to what I assumed was his attorney. The listing was pulled within hours, and by the time my plane touched down in Portland, the entire transaction was unraveling. The Uber ride from the airport gave me time to prepare mentally for what was waiting at home. I wasn't sure if Marcus would be there, if Vanessa would be there, or if they'd already started moving their things into what they thought was their new life together. Our house, my house, looked exactly the same from the outside. Same red front door, same garden that I'd spent last weekend weeding, same porch swing where I'd drunk my coffee every morning for 3 years. But everything felt different now, like I was seeing it through new eyes. I used my key to let myself in, and the first thing I noticed was the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen, female laughter that wasn't mine. I set my suitcase down quietly by the door and followed the sound, my heart pounding but my mind crystal clear. Through the archway, I could see them, Marcus leaning against the counter I'd picked out, his arm around a petite blonde woman who was perched on one of the stalls I'd spent hours researching and ordering online. Vanessa was younger than me, maybe 25 to my 32, with the kind of effortless beauty that comes from good genes and expensive skincare. She was wearing one of those designer workout sets that cost more than most people's rent, and her engagement ring, my God, the rock on her finger could have been seen from space. "I can't believe how quickly everything came together," she was saying, gesturing around the kitchen with obvious satisfaction. "When you said you'd handle everything, I didn't think you meant literally everything." Marcus puffed up with pride. "What can I say? When I make a decision, I don't mess around. Sarah never would have agreed to sell this place. She was way too attached to it. But now, we can start fresh, just you and me. And the money from the sale will be enough for the down payment on that condo downtown," Vanessa asked, running her finger along his jaw in a way that made my stomach turn. "More than enough, baby. We'll have plenty left over to furnish it exactly how you want." I stepped into the kitchen doorway and cleared my throat. The look on Marcus's face was priceless. Shock, guilt, and calculation all flashing across his features in rapid succession. Vanessa just looked confused, like she couldn't quite place who I might be. "Hi, honey," I said, my voice perfectly pleasant. "I'm home." Marcus straightened up so fast he nearly knocked Vanessa off the stool. "Sarah, you're early." "And I?" I glanced at my watch theatrically. Fight was right on time, actually. I hope you don't mind that I let myself in. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. To my own house. Vanessa looked between us, her perfectly plucked eyebrows drawing together. Marcus, who is this? This, I said, extending my hand with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Is Sarah, Marcus's wife, and you must be the woman he's been spending my money on. The color drained from Vanessa's face, but Marcus jumped in quickly. Ex-wife, he corrected sharply. Sarah, what are you doing here? I told you, I sold the house. You can't just walk in here anymore. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. That's interesting, Marcus, because I just got off the phone with your real estate agent. Apparently there's been a little hiccup with the sale. What kind of hiccup? Vanessa demanded, her voice rising. I pulled out my phone and made a show of checking my emails. Oh, you know, the usual kind that happens when someone tries to sell property they don't actually own. The listing's been pulled, the buyers are threatening to sue, and there's a very good chance that what you've done constitutes real estate fraud. Marcus went white. That's impossible. The deed has both our names on it. Actually, Marcus, it doesn't. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder of documents Rebecca had prepared for me. See, when we refinanced last year, remember how you were so busy flirting with your secretary that you didn't bother reading what you were signing? You signed over your portion of ownership to me. The house has been solely in my name for 8 months. The silence that followed was deafening. I could actually see the moment it hit him, the realization that his carefully planned betrayal had just imploded spectacularly. Vanessa slid off the stool, her designer bag clutched to her chest like armor. What does this mean? She whispered. It means, I said, my voice gentle but implacable, that Marcus just promised you money he doesn't have, from a sale that never happened, of a house that was never his to sell. It means he's lied to you about pretty much everything. Marcus found his voice then, anger replacing shock. You can't do this, Sarah. We're married. Community property laws don't apply when one spouse commits fraud. I interrupted. My attorney was very clear about that. But please, don't let me interrupt your celebration. I'm sure you two have a lot to discuss. I turned to leave, then paused and looked back over my shoulder. Oh, and Marcus, you might want to call whoever you gave that deposit to, because if you can't return their money by tomorrow, they're going to be very, very unhappy with you. As I walked up the stairs to what used to be our bedroom, I could hear Vanessa's voice rising in panic, and Marcus's desperate attempts to calm her down. The sound was music to my ears. I spent the next hour methodically packing Marcus's belongings, not out of kindness, but because I wanted him gone, and I knew he'd use any excuse to keep coming back if his things were still here. And every shirt I folded, every pair of shoes I placed in boxes, felt like another step toward freedom. By the time I finished, the house had gone quiet downstairs. I hauled the first box down to find Marcus sitting alone at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. No sign of Vanessa. Where's your girlfriend? I asked, setting the box by the front door. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. She left, said she needed time to think. He laughed bitterly. 7 months together, and she bolts the second things get complicated. Imagine that, I said dryly. A gold digger who's only interested in you when you have gold to dig. Who could have seen that coming? Sarah, please. His voice cracked. We can fix this. I made a mistake, but we can... Now, Marcus. I sat down across from him, and for the first time since I'd walked into this kitchen, my mask slipped a little. We can't fix this. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to cheat on me. You chose to lie to me. You chose to try to steal my home and leave me with nothing. Those weren't accidents, Marcus. They were decisions. He reached across the table toward my hand, but I pulled back. I never meant to hurt you. Yes, you did. The certainty in my own voice surprised me. Maybe not at first, but somewhere along the way you decided I was expendable. You decided I deserved whatever you chose to give me, and when you got tired of pretending to care, you decided I deserved nothing. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in years. But here's the thing you never understood about me, Marcus. I'm not expendable. I'm not passive. And I'm definitely not someone you can just throw away when you find a newer model. The rest of the boxes took 3 more trips. Marcus helped, moving like a man in a trance, and I let him. When the last of his belongings was stacked by the door, he turned to me one final time. What happens now? I handed him the divorce papers Rebecca had drawn up. Now you sign these, you figure out how you're going to pay back the money you took from those buyers, and you pray that I decide not to press charges. His hands shook as he flipped through the papers. And if I don't sign? I smiled, and this time it was genuine. Then my next call is to the district attorney's office. Your choice, Marcus, just like always. He signed. As I watched his Audi disappear down the street, taillights fading into the evening darkness, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The house was quiet around me, but it was a good quiet, a clean quiet. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. How did it go? I typed back. Phase 1 complete. Time for Phase 2. Because as satisfying as it had been to watch Marcus's world crumble, I wasn't done. Not even close. He'd spent months making me feel small, worthless, like I should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention he threw my way. He'd systematically torn down my self-worth while building up his new relationship with my money, in my house, behind my back. And now it was time for him to learn what real consequences felt like. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, in my own house, for the first time in months without that knot of anxiety in my stomach. The coffee tasted better, the morning light seemed brighter, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I barely recognized, a woman who knew exactly what she was worth, but I was far from done. Marcus thought the worst was behind him. He'd signed the divorce papers, moved his stuff out, and probably assumed that after a few awkward weeks we'd settle into some kind of settled post-divorce routine. He was wrong. See, during those sleepless hours after his phone call in Seattle, I'd done more than just research real estate law. I'd dug so low, and silent writing, and social media accounts. What I found was a pattern of behavior that went far beyond just cheating on me. Marcus had been living a lie for months, maybe years. The successful financial advisor image he'd cultivated, built on credit card debt and borrowed money. The expensive dinners, the designer gifts for Vanessa, the confident talk about buying a downtown condo, all of it funded by money he didn't have, including money he'd stolen from me. I spent the morning at Rebecca's office, spreading out bank statements and credit card bills across her conference table like pieces of a puzzle. What emerged was a picture of systematic financial more fade. Did it matter for me to pray that there was no more weight and more worse? Sarah, Rebecca said, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the documents. This is worse than I thought. He's been using your joint accounts to fund his affair for months. Look at this. Dinner at Le Bernardin the night you were working late on the Morrison campaign. $800 at Tiffany 3 days after you gave him your freelance check to help with the mortgage. I stared at the highlighted transactions, each one a small betrayal that added up to something massive. Can we prove it was for her? Rebecca smiled grimly. His Instagram account is public. Want to see what Vanessa was wearing to dinner that night? The photo showed Vanessa glowing in candlelight, showing off a delicate diamond bracelet that I now knew cost more than my monthly salary. The location tag confirmed it. Le Bernardin. The same night Marcus had told me he was working late with a difficult client. This isn't just adultery. Rebecca continued. This is theft. He stole from your joint accounts to finance his relationship with another woman. In Oregon, that's considered dissipation of marital assets, and it gives us grounds to demand full restitution plus damages. But I had bigger plans than just getting my money back. Rebecca, I said, leaning forward, I want you to help me destroy him. Legally, of course, but I want Marcus to understand what it feels like to lose everything. Her eyes lit up. Everyone has the best sign. What did you have in mind? Phase 2 began with a phone call to Marcus's employer. Pinnacle Financial Group prided itself on integrity and client trust. Their marketing materials were full of phrases like, "Your financial future is our sacred responsibility," built on a foundation of trust and transparency. I wondered how they'd feel about an employee who committed fraud and theft. The conversation with Janet Morrison, the HR director, was delicate but devastating. I presented myself as a concerned soon-to-be ex-wife who had discovered some irregularities in our joint finances and wanted to make sure there weren't any conflicts with Marcus's professional responsibilities. "This is Chen," Janet said carefully. "I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. Would you be willing to forward any documentation you have? We take these matters very seriously." "Of course," I replied. "I'll have my attorney send everything over this afternoon. I just want to make sure no clients are at risk." The beauty of this approach was that I wasn't lying or even exaggerating. Marcus had genuinely committed fraud, had genuinely stolen money, and had genuinely created a situation that could reflect poorly on his employer. I was simply making sure the right people were aware of the facts. By noon, Marcus's professional reputation was hanging by a thread. But I wasn't done yet. Phase 3 involved Vanessa. See, I'd done some research on Marcus's girlfriend, and what I'd found was interesting. Vanessa Brooks worked as a social media influencer and lifestyle blogger with about 50,000 Instagram followers who tuned in for her daily doses of blessed living and relationship advice. Her recent posts had been particularly tone-deaf, lots of content about knowing your worth and never settling for less than you deserve, and toxic people will always try to drag you down. All while she was actively helping my husband steal from me and destroy my marriage. I spent the afternoon crafting what I called my truth bomb, a detailed factual account of Marcus and Vanessa's affair, complete with receipts, bank statements showing the stolen money, screenshots of their social media posts from dates I could prove I was paying for, copies of the fraudulent house sale documents, everything meticulously documented and verified. Then I created a fake Instagram account and started commenting on Vanessa's posts. Nothing nasty or threatening, just questions. Innocent, curious questions that would make her followers start thinking. Under a post about red flags in relationships, I commented, "What about men who steal from their wives to pay for dates? Asking for a friend, wink." Under a photo of her wearing that Tiffany bracelet. "Gorgeous. Was this a gift from that married guy you're dating? It looks expensive." Under her latest motivational Monday post about a deserving better, "I know much more. I haven't followed the list of the story. Do you think the wife deserves better too? Just curious about your thoughts on the other woman in these situations." Each comment was calm, polite, and absolutely factual, and they worked exactly as I'd hoped. Within hours, Vanessa's comment sections were full of her followers asking questions she couldn't answer without admitting to being a homewrecker. The more she deleted comments and blocked accounts, the more suspicious it looked. By evening, number Vanessa Brooks' homewrecker was trending locally, and her follow account had dropped by 10,000. But the real masterpiece came the next day. Marcus called me, his voice shaking with fury. "Sarah, what the hell did you do?" "I'm going to need you to be more specific," I said, examining my nails with satisfaction. "My job. They've put me on administrative leave pending an investigation. And Vanessa, someone's been harassing her online. Her sponsors are pulling out. That's terrible." I said, not bothering to hide the smile in my voice. It's almost like actions have consequences.
This is insane. You're destroying my entire life.
No, Marcus, I said, my voice turning sharp. You destroyed your own life when you decided to cheat on me with my money. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth about who you really are.
I'll sue you for defamation.
I laughed. With what lawyer? Last I checked, you're about to be unemployed and you owe your former buyers $50,000 you don't have. But please, feel free to try. Discovery is going to be very interesting. The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Marcus was finally beginning to understand the scope of what he'd lost. But I still had one more move to make. The final phase wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. That weekend, I invited everyone who mattered to a dinner party at my house. Our former couple friends, Marcus's colleagues who hadn't yet heard about his suspension, some of Vanessa's influencer friends who'd been tagged in her recent posts. I billed it as a celebration of new beginnings and promised good food and better wine. What they got was the full story. I didn't ambush anyone or create a dramatic scene. Instead, I waited until everyone was relaxed and comfortable, then simply started talking. I told them about the phone call in Seattle, about discovering the fraudulent house sale, about the months of stolen money and lies and betrayal. I showed them the evidence, not vindictively but matter-of-factly, the way you'd show photos from a recent vacation. Here are the bank statements, here are the social media posts, here are the legal documents proving fraud. The room was completely silent as I spoke, 20 people hanging on every word. When I finished, the silence stretched for another long moment before Tom Bradley, Marcus's former mentor, spoke up. Jesus, Sarah, I had no idea. We all thought. Marcus made it sound like you two just grew apart. That's the story he wanted people to believe, I said with a shrug. The reality is messier. Amanda Foster, who'd been Vanessa's college roommate, looked sick. She told us she was dating someone who was separated. She said his divorce was almost final. His divorce was news to me until he called to tell me about it. I replied, along with the news that he'd sold my house. What followed was exactly what I'd hoped for, a complete social reckoning. Marcus's friends realized they'd been lied to and manipulated. Vanessa's friends understood they'd been supporting a woman who'd built her happiness on destroying someone else's marriage. The professional contacts saw through the facade of success to the reality of fraud and theft underneath. By the end of the evening, Marcus and Vanessa weren't just romantically finished, they were socially destroyed. My phone started buzzing with texts before the last guest had even left. Messages of support, apologies from people who'd believed Marcus's version of events, offers of help if I needed. Anything. For the first time in months, I felt surrounded by people who actually cared about me. But the best text came from an unknown number at midnight. You win. Leave me alone. I showed it to Rebecca the next morning. Is this admission of guilt? She grinned. In a court of law? Probably not. But in the court of public opinion? Absolutely. Marcus's administrative leave became a termination by the end of the week. Turns out, several clients had started asking uncomfortable questions about his judgment and integrity after word of the dinner party spread through Portland's tight-knit professional community. Pinnacle Financial Group decided they couldn't afford the association. Vanessa's influencer career never recovered. The sponsors who'd initially just postponed their partnerships eventually cancelled them entirely, and her attempts to rebrand as a redemption story fell flat with an audience who'd lost trust in her authenticity. They tried to make it work together. I heard through mutual friends that they'd moved into a cramped studio apartment and were working on rebuilding. But when you've built a relationship on lies, stolen money, and the thrill of betrayal, what's left when all of that disappears? They broke up 3 months later, each blaming the other for their mutual downfall. Meanwhile, I was thriving. The house felt like home again, filled with friends who valued honesty and loyalty. My work was going better than ever. Turns out, when you're not constantly stressed about your marriage falling apart, you have a lot more creative energy to invest in your career. And I was dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I'd met someone, David, a veterinarian with can eyes and calloused hands, who listened when I talked and never made me feel like I was asking for too much. The contrast with Marcus was so stark it was almost comical. One evening, as David and I sat on the porch swing I'd almost lost, watching the sunset paint the Portland skyline in shades of gold and pink, he asked me about the whole Marcus situation. "Do you ever regret how it all went down?" he said, his fingers intertwined with mine. "I mean, it sounds like you really went nuclear on the guy." I considered the question seriously. Did I regret destroying Marcus's career, his relationship, his social standing? Did I regret making sure everyone knew exactly what kind of man he really was? "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it at all. Marcus spent months systematically tearing me down, making me question my own worth, stealing from me to build a life with someone else. He thought I was weak, that I'd just take whatever he decided to give me and be grateful for it." I leaned against David's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of someone who actually cared about my well-being. What I did wasn't about revenge, it was about consequences. Marcus made choices, and those choices had results. I just made sure he couldn't escape them or pass the blame to someone else. David was quiet for a moment. "And Vanessa?" Vanessa made her own choices too. She knew Marcus was married. She wasn't some innocent victim. She actively participated in defrauding me and destroying my marriage. I shrugged. She got exactly what she deserved. As we sat there in comfortable silence, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, constantly walking on eggshells, making myself smaller to accommodate Marcus's ego, accepting crumbs of affection and calling it love. That woman felt like a stranger now. The woman I'd become wouldn't accept less than she deserved. She wouldn't stay silent when someone tried to cheat her or betray her trust. She wouldn't let anyone make her feel like she was asking for too much, when all she wanted was basic respect and honesty. 6 months after that dinner party, I thought the Marcus chapter of my life was finally closed. He'd moved back to his hometown in Ohio, tail between his legs, working at some small insurance firm for a fraction of his former salary. As Marcus said, what the most easiest tragedy of Elvis had. He lived in his life on balance of terror today, but beyond his territory. Vanessa had retreated from social media entirely after her follower count dropped below 5,000 and the harassment became too much to handle. As far as I knew, they were both trying to rebuild their lives far away from the wreckage they'd created in Portland. I was wrong. It started with strange phone calls, hang-ups when I answered, weird breathing, then silence. Then my car got keyed in the grocery store parking lot. Nothing I could prove, nothing that screamed, Marcus. But the timing felt too convenient to be coincidence. Then came the fake online reviews. Someone had created multiple fake accounts and started leaving scathing reviews of my marketing firm on every platform imaginable. Google, Yelp, Facebook, industry websites, all claiming I was unprofessional, unreliable, and had stolen money from clients. The reviews were clearly fake, full of details that didn't match my actual work, and written in a style that felt familiar, but they were persistent and numerous enough to start affecting my business. My boss, Sandra, called me into her office on a Tuesday morning, her expression grim. "Sarah, we need to talk about these online reviews. 3 potential clients have mentioned them in the past week. I sat across from her desk, my stomach sinking. I know about them, Sandra. I'm working with a reputation management company to get them taken down, but the process is slow. Do you have any idea who might be doing this? I hesitated. Accusing Marcus without proof would make me sound paranoid, but the alternative was letting Sandra think I'd actually done something to deserve these reviews. I have suspicions, but nothing I can prove yet. Sandra nodded slowly. Look, Sarah, your work here has been exemplary, but we can't have this kind of cloud hanging over the agency. I'm not firing you, but I need you to figure this out quickly. That evening, I called Rebecca in a panic and found me hearing, "He's trying to destroy my career now. The reviews, the harassment. It has to be Marcus, but I can't prove it." "We'll figure it out," Rebecca said firmly. "But Sarah, you need to document everything. Every call, every incident, every review. If this escalates, we're going to need evidence." It escalated. The next week, I came home to find my front garden destroyed. Not just damaged, systematically destroyed. Every plant I'd carefully cultivated over 3 years had been ripped out by the roots and scattered across the lawn. My mailbox had been knocked over, and someone had spray painted "Karma" across my front steps in bright red letters. I stood on my porch, staring at the destruction, and felt something I hadn't experienced since that phone call in Seattle. Pure, undiluted rage. But this time, it was different. This time I wasn't shocked or hurt or confused. I was just done. Marcus had already lost his job, his girlfriend, his reputation, and his social standing. By any reasonable measure, he'd face consequences for his actions. But apparently, that wasn't enough for him. He wanted to destroy me completely, to make me pay for having the audacity to fight back when he tried to steal my life. Well, if Marcus wanted to play this game, I was ready to show him how it was really played. I spent the next 2 weeks turning my house into Fort Knox. Security cameras, motion sensors, doorbell cam, the works. Every angle was covered, every approach monitored. If Marcus or whoever he'd hired to do his dirty work came back, I'd have them on video. I also hired a private investigator named Jake Morrison, a former cop who specialized in stalking and harassment cases. Jake was quiet, methodical, and had the kind of attention to detail that made him very good at his job. The good news, Jake told me after reviewing everything I'd documented, is that this guy isn't as smart as he thinks he is. The timing of the incidents, the escalation pattern, the specific language in some of those fake reviews, it all points to someone with a personal grudge who's letting emotion cloud their judgment. And the bad news? The bad news is that he's escalating. Vandalism, harassment, character assassination. These are the actions of someone who's lost perspective. He's not going to stop until he's forced to stop. Jake leaned forward, his expression serious. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about revenge anymore. Marcus is exhibiting classic stalker behavior, and stalkers don't de-escalate on their own. They have to be stopped." The breakthrough came 3 days later. I was working late at the office when my phone buzzed with an alert from my security system. Someone was on my property. I opened the app and watched in real time as a figure in dark clothing crept around the side of my house, clearly looking for the best way to approach without being seen. But here's the thing about installing professional-grade security equipment. It sees everything, even in the dark. The figure was Marcus. I watched him creep through my garden, examining my windows and doors, clearly planning some kind of break-in or vandalism. My hands were shaking as I called Jake, then 911, but my voice was steady. "I have an active trespasser on my property," I told the dispatcher. "I have him on video, and I believe he's planning to break in." 20 minutes later, Marcus was in handcuffs in my driveway, caught red-handed with a bag full of spray paint, garden shears, and what the police delicately called implements of mischief. The look on his face when he realized he'd been caught was priceless. Shock, rage, and something that might have been fear all rolled into one. But the best part came when Jake presented his evidence to the investigating officers. "We've been tracking Mr. Chen's harassment campaign for 2 weeks," Jake explained, handing over a thick folder of documentation. "The fake reviews, the previous vandalism, the pattern of escalation, it's all here. This isn't a crime of opportunity. This is systematic stalking and harassment." The officer reviewing the evidence whistled low. "Ma'am, this is enough for multiple felony charges. Breaking and entering, stalking, cyberstalking, harassment, vandalism. Your ex-husband has been very busy. Marcus spent the night in jail, and I spent it wide awake, finally feeling safe in my own home for the first time in months." The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. Marcus's lawyer, a court-appointed defender who clearly wished he was anywhere else, tried to argue that his client was going through a difficult emotional time and deserved leniency. Rebecca destroyed that argument in about 30 seconds. "Your Honor," she said, standing confidently at the prosecutor's table, "Mr. Chen has shown a pattern of criminal behavior that spans over a year. He committed fraud by attempting to sell property he didn't own. He stole money from joint accounts to fund an extramarital affair. And when he faced consequences for those actions, he escalated to stalking, harassment, and attempted breaking and entering." And she gestured to the evidence spread across the table. "This isn't a man going through a difficult time. This is a man who believes he's above the law and that other people exist solely for his benefit. He's had multiple opportunities to accept responsibility and move on with his life. Instead, he chose to terrorize his ex-wife." The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, who looked like she'd heard every sob story in the book, was not impressed with Marcus's plea for mercy. "Mr. Chen," she said, looking down at him over her reading glasses, "your behavior represents a systematic campaign of harassment and intimidation against someone who was already the victim of your fraud. This court takes stalking very seriously, particularly when it involves escalating criminal behavior." She sentenced him to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation and a permanent restraining order. The cyberstalking and fraud charges in combination had pushed his sentencing into felony territory, which meant Marcus was now a convicted felon. His chances of ever working in finance again were exactly 0. As the bailiff led Marcus away in shackles, he turned to look at me one last time. The expression on his face was pure hatred, not regret, not remorse, but fury that I dared to fight back and win. That look told me everything I needed to know about the man I'd married. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done to me. He was sorry he'd been caught. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca and I stood in the afternoon sunlight, watching normal people go about their normal lives. "How do you feel?" she asked. I considered the question. How did I feel? Free, safe, vindicated, but also tired. It had been over a year since that phone call in Seattle, and I'd spent most of that time fighting just to reclaim my basic right to exist without harassment. "I feel like I can finally breathe again," I said. Rebecca smiled. "Good. You deserve that." 3 months later, I was sitting in that same courthouse, but this time for a very different reason. The civil lawsuit against Marcus had resulted in a judgment for full restitution of the money he'd stolen, plus damages for the harassment and business losses caused by his fake review campaign. Of course, Marcus was in prison and had no assets, so the judgment was mostly symbolic, but sometimes symbols matter. The real victory wasn't the money, it was the public record. Anyone who Googled Marcus Chen would find court documents detailing his crimes. Any future employer, landlord, or romantic partner would know exactly what kind of man they were dealing with. Marcus had spent months trying to destroy my reputation. Instead, he'd permanently destroyed his own. 2 years have passed since that phone call that changed everything. I'm writing this from my home office, the same room where I used to tiptoe around Marcus's moods, trying to make myself smaller so he'd have more space to shine. The house is different now, brighter, warmer, filled with friends who value honesty and love that doesn't come with conditions. David and I moved in together 6 months ago, and the contrast with my marriage to Marcus is so stark it's almost funny. When David disagrees with me, he says so respectfully, and we talk it out. When I succeed at work, he celebrates with me, instead of finding ways to diminish my achievements. When I need support, he offers it without making me feel like I'm asking for too much. It turns out, healthy relationships aren't actually that complicated when both people are committed to treating each other with basic respect. Marcus was released from prison last month. I know because the Victim Services Coordinator called to inform me, as required by law. He's living in Ohio with his parents, working at a Walmart, and required to check in with his parole officer twice a week. I don't feel sorry for him. People have asked me if I think my response was too extreme, if maybe I should have just taken the high road and moved on with my life. Those people fundamentally misunderstand what Marcus did to me. He didn't just cheat on me, or leave me for another woman. He systematically stole from me, lied to me, and tried to take everything I'd worked for. When that didn't work, he escalated to stalking and harassment, trying to destroy my career and my sense of safety in my own home. Marcus made choice after choice after choice, each one designed to hurt me and benefit himself. The consequences he faced weren't my revenge. They were the natural result of his own actions. I simply refused to be a silent victim. The woman I was before that phone call might have accepted Marcus's betrayal as something she deserved. She might have quietly found a new place to live, accepted whatever scraps of their joint assets he decided to leave her, and spent years rebuilding her life while he enjoyed his new relationship built on stolen money. That woman would have been destroyed by what Marcus tried to do to her, but I'm not that woman anymore. I'm someone who knows her worth, who won't accept less than she deserves, who fights back when someone tries to take what's hers. I'm someone who understands that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. Marcus thought he could use my love against me, that my willingness to trust and support him meant I was weak and exploitable. He learned the hard way that there's a difference between being kind and being a doormat, between being forgiving and being foolish. The best revenge really is living well, but sometimes living well requires making sure the people who tried to destroy you can't do it to anyone else. Sometimes justice looks like a woman standing in her own kitchen, in her own house, watching her cheating ex-husband realize he's lost everything because he underestimated the wrong person. And sometimes that's enough. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt underestimated or betrayed by someone you trusted, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. And if you believe in the power of standing up for yourself and refusing to be anyone's doormat, subscribe for more stories of people who fought back and won. Remember, you teach people how to treat you. Make sure you're teaching them the right lessons.